Hi, my name is Tessmann, and today I'm going to show you how I shim my diffs and a couple tips that I found to make your crown and pinion last longer. Okay, so I'm going to start with the pinion shimming. And for the Hot Bodies car, the manual says to use 2 shims behind this pinion gear. And for that, this allows it to have a little bit of play back and forth. And that way it doesn't put any pressure on the bearings side to side. And then when the diff is in there and the gears are spinning, it pushes the pinion back into the case against that bearing and against the shims. And it's not really going to affect the diff shimming anyway, being able to move back and forth. So I'm going to start with the diff gear now. And for this, for our car, I always put 2 shims on the gear side to start off, and then 1 shim on the other side. And then I'll put the gear in, and I'll be holding the pinion. I'll be holding the pinion with my fingers to the back of the case, or the front of the case, to the outside basically. When I do this, when I check the gear mesh. So I'll hold the pinion, pulling it out of the case, and then I'll move the gear back and forth with my fingers, and then I've checked that, and it has a little bit of play, too much play back and forth. And also, the diff moves side to side. So that's not a good thing. So I'm going to put 1 shim on each side to tighten that up. And with every car, it might be different how thick the shims are, how many you need to add for how much spacing is, but you'll just have to figure that out with your particular brand. So then I'll hold the pinion again. I'll be pulling the pinion out with one hand, and then I'll move the crown gear or the diff back, just try to wiggle it back and forth. And you can kind of hear that clacking. And then I'll make sure, so the diff is tight now. So I'm going to put 1 shim here. Even though it's tight, sometimes you can squeeze another shim in there just to make sure that the gear, just squish it in there. That way it has a little bit more pressure on this side, but it still doesn't move back and forth. Because if you take a shim out of here, then it may be too close. So it's kind of like a half movement almost. So again, I'll be holding the pinion. I'll move it back and forth. Now it's tight. You can hear it kind of has a tight spot. So before I just take shims out again with that, I'm going to put the front case on and screw it together, because sometimes it can change with putting this all together. It can either be looser or tighter, so you really don't want to make a definite call before it's all strapped together. So I'll put the screws on, and then put my drill with the chuck set to fairly light, just so it doesn't stop, or it stops soon. See, that one screw is a little bit tighter. And then I'll take a 2.5 and finish it the rest of the way. I'll put the bottom ones in. I'll have to put the clutch a little bit tighter for this one, because these screws are a little bit bigger and a little bit tighter. Sometimes they're not, so I'll finish it the rest of the way with a wrench, just so you don't have to, so make sure you don't strip the screw out, because if you have your drill set wrong, you can over tighten it or strip the screw out. So with these gears, also, they're straight cut gears, and with the D812, they were helical cut gears, where you could run the helical cut gears a little bit on the loose side, and it wouldn't hurt it. With these gears, with the straight cut, you need to make sure that the gear, if it's not perfect mesh, on the tight side is a little bit better than on the loose side. So you can see it's free all the way. There's a tight spot right there. But that's how I run my diffs, because when you get extreme load under it, like if you land on power or something, the diff case is going to flex a little bit, and it's going to be better to be on the tight side than the loose side. So that little bit of just a tiny tight spot is going to be all right. So I'll leave it like that. The screws are all tight. Shims, I had to put a lot more shims than the manual says, and I never really go by what the manual says on the shims, because every diff case is a little bit different. Even if, like I say, I'll run this through a race and then I'll rebuild it after that, I'll put the diff back in, but I won't just leave the same shims that were in there. I'll make sure it's still good, because the diff case can change. It can warp a little bit, or the bearings can settle in, or anything can happen that it'll be different. So I'll make sure that every time I run it, I'll check it and make sure it's the right shimming, and then that'll make your gears last longer. It'll have better wear, your car will be freer, and it'll just be all around better. So then I'll finish it with putting some 110% RC blood. And this grease will make your gears last longer, and especially on like the 10th scale cars where you want them kind of quiet, so the gear diffs usually are noisy, so I'll put this on and it'll quiet them down a lot. It really helps. So I'll put grease on a couple spots, run it in, and then everything's coated and lubricated and it's all good to go. And all these tips transfer over to 10th scale, anything really with a crown and pinion gear. So that's how I shim my diffs. Hope you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned for the next one.